No one remembered who first called humans vermin, but everyone remembered the laughter that followed. It echoed through the Galactic Assembly's vaulted chambers when Earth's final ambassador stood alone beneath banners representing 1,000 starfaring civilizations. The Car Dominion, towering predators wrapped in ceremonial armor, dismissed humanity as an evolutionary accident. The crystalline Vesh calculated that humans would collapse within 3 generations. The machine consensus known as the Chorus concluded there was only a 0.0003% chance that Earth would remain politically relevant beyond the century. One by one, the greatest powers of the galaxy voted to quarantine humanity, not because people were dangerous, but because they were considered beneath notice. They could keep their small blue world, their improvised technology, and their endless conflicts, so long as they never imagined themselves equals. Ambassador Elena Ward listened in silence as the verdict became law. She did not plead. She did not threaten. She simply looked at every delegate and said, "History has a habit of embarrassing those who mistake survival for weakness." Her words were recorded, archived, and immediately forgotten. Or so they believed. 50 years later, Captain Nathan Cross crouched inside the rusted ventilation shaft of an abandoned orbital refinery while alarms screamed across the station. The metal beneath his gloves vibrated with distant explosions as automated security drones swept corridor after corridor searching for the last surviving human infiltrator. Sweat rolled down his face despite the freezing air recycling through the vents. His rifle had only 3 rounds left, his oxygen reserve was falling fast, and the artificial intelligence controlling the refinery had sealed every conventional escape route. Somewhere below, thousands of enslaved workers from conquered civilizations waited in silence, convinced rescue would never come because nobody challenged the Chorus and lived. Nathan smiled despite the odds. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, economic collapse, and every prediction of extinction they had ever received. They had become experts at living where logic insisted they should die. That talent had only sharpened after the galaxy rejected them. Earth had transformed from an isolated backwater into a civilization obsessed with adaptation. While powerful empires built monuments and perfect fleets, humans built hidden shipyards inside asteroids, converted mining drones into war machines, and learned to thrive in environments everyone else abandoned. Every insult became motivation. Every defeat became instruction. Every impossible obstacle became another engineering problem waiting for an unreasonable solution. Nathan represented the generation raised on those lessons. He had never believed humanity deserved respect simply because it existed. Respect was something earned one impossible victory at a time. His mission was absurd even by human standards. Break into an impregnable refinery governed by an ancient machine intelligence, free thousands of prisoners, steal classified navigation archives, and escape before an entire Dominion battle group arrived. Every Allied strategist had called the operation suicidal. Nathan had accepted anyway because humans understood a simple truth the galaxy never had. Persistence defeated perfection more often than pride admitted. Above the station, dozens of alien warships emerged from hyperspace, their weapons charging in synchronized silence. Deep beneath the refinery, forgotten systems older than the Dominion suddenly awakened, responding not to alien commands but to a genetic authorization code hidden inside human DNA since the earliest days of Earth's exploration program. Nathan's wrist communicator crackled once before a voice he had never heard whispered, "Authorization confirmed." "Welcome back, custodian. The galaxy believes humanity are vermin. Shall we remind them who built the traps?" Nathan froze as the whisper faded, not because he feared another trap, but because the word custodian awakened a memory buried beneath years of military discipline. His grandmother had once repeated impossible stories about Earth's earliest explorers, insisting humanity had inherited responsibilities older than recorded history. Nathan dismissed them as comforting myths after the Dominion destroyed her home during the harvest raids. Standing inside the forgotten refinery, surrounded by ancient machinery responding to his presence alone, those stories no longer sounded impossible. They sounded unfinished. Before joining the resistance, Nathan had been an orbital engineer repairing weather satellites above the recovering oceans of Earth. He preferred machines because they followed honest rules, unlike politicians who surrendered colonies for temporary peace or admirals who accepted humiliating treaties simply to buy another decade. Everything changed when his younger sister, Emma, volunteered aboard a humanitarian convoy delivering medicine to frontier settlements. Dominion patrols intercepted the convoy despite protected status, claiming navigation confusion. Everyone knew the attack was deliberate. No survivors returned. Nathan never recovered her body, only the damaged bracelet she always wore, recovered years later by smugglers trading battlefield salvage. He carried it inside his armor every mission, not as fuel for hatred, but as a reminder that ordinary lives deserved extraordinary defenders. Humanity's resistance had never been about revenge alone. Hidden settlements scattered through asteroid belts sheltered refugees from dozens of conquered species because humans refused to measure compassion by biology. Car children played beside displaced Vesh scholars, while former Dominion prisoners taught languages, medicine, and survival techniques. Every rescued stranger strengthened the fragile alliance. Some commanders argued those efforts wasted precious resources. Nathan disagreed. Empires ruled through fear. Humanity endured through stubborn trust. That difference mattered more than fleet size. The prisoners below represented families, memories, and futures, not statistics. His closest ally understood that better than anyone. Lieutenant Sanaa Brooks waited beyond the refinery disguised as a salvager, coordinating extraction with outdated freighters everyone else considered worthless. She and Nathan had survived academy training together, survived impossible retreats together, and survived losing people they never stopped missing. They rarely spoke about feelings because missions left little room for grief, yet every silent glance carried years of shared sacrifice. She once confessed she feared victory almost as much as defeat because she no longer remembered how peaceful mornings felt. Nathan admitted he remembered them perfectly. That was why he kept fighting. He wanted children born after the war to think peaceful mornings were ordinary again. The communicator pulsed once more. This time the mysterious voice sounded warmer, almost curious. It explained the refinery had been constructed by the first navigators, an ancient civilization that scattered guardian systems across unexplored regions before vanishing. Their technology recognized qualities instead of species, evaluating persistence, adaptability, and willingness to protect weaker lives. Countless empires had searched for these forgotten networks seeking ultimate power. Every one failed because they expected obedience instead of partnership. Humanity succeeded without realizing the test existed. Nathan laughed quietly despite the danger. Being underestimated had become humanity's greatest advantage. Powerful civilizations chased glorious victories while humans mastered impossible recoveries, turning scrap into starships, failures into innovations, and heartbreak into determination. Above him, battle cruisers sealed every escape vector, convinced overwhelming force guaranteed success. Below him, thousands waited for someone foolish enough to challenge certainty itself. Nathan tightened his grip around Emma's bracelet, climbed toward the awakening control chamber, and realized the greatest secret hidden inside the ancient refinery was not an unstoppable weapon. It was proof that across the stars, endurance had always been the rarest intelligence of all. Forever. Nathan stepped into the control chamber expecting forgotten machines and silent consoles, but instead found a circular room illuminated by pale blue light flowing beneath transparent flooring. Ancient symbols shifted across towering pillars while countless stars rotated overhead in a living map that reacted to every heartbeat. The mysterious voice finally gave itself a name. Designation Lyra. Guardian Intelligence. Last operational custodian network overseer. Unlike the cold certainty of the chorus, Lyra spoke with quiet patience, almost as if she had spent thousands of years waiting for someone willing to listen instead of command. Before Nathan could ask another question, every display flashed crimson. The Dominion fleet had not arrived alone. Hidden behind their battleships drifted vessels bearing human identification codes. For a brief second, hope surged through Nathan. Reinforcements. Then Lyra magnified the transmissions. The lead vessel belonged to Admiral Victor Harlan, one of humanity's highest-ranking commanders and a celebrated hero of the frontier defense. Nathan felt his stomach tighten as Harlan calmly transmitted refinery access codes directly to the Dominion flagship. Years of coordinated resistance safe houses, hidden shipyards, and evacuation routes followed seconds later. The impossible had happened. Humanity had not been defeated from the outside. It had been betrayed from within. Nathan wanted to believe there had to be an explanation, but Harlan's voice erased every doubt. He declared humanity's resistance hopeless and announced he had negotiated survival for selected colonies in exchange for complete cooperation with the Dominion and the Chorus. Billions beyond those protected territories would simply become expendable. Nathan stared at the transmission in stunned silence. Emma had believed Harlan's speeches. She had volunteered for her humanitarian convoy because she trusted leaders who promised every life mattered. Rage burned through Nathan, but beneath it came something even heavier. Disappointment. Humanity's greatest victories had always depended on trust, and now that trust had been sold for comfort. Lyra interrupted before despair could take hold. The betrayal activated emergency protocols buried inside the refinery. The ancient network had detected an extinction-level threat, not because enemy fleets surrounded the station, but because humanity itself had fractured. If the Dominion captured the custodian systems using Harlan's access, they would gain control of hidden gateways scattered throughout unexplored space, reaching every surviving refuge in days instead of decades. The war would end before another generation had a chance to fight. Nathan suddenly understood the true mission. Rescuing prisoners was no longer enough. He had to prevent the network from falling into enemy hands, even if it meant destroying the only advantage humanity had ever discovered. Meanwhile, Sanaa's voice burst through the communicator between waves of interference. Her disguised freighters had been exposed after an anonymous transmission revealed every extraction route. Dominion fighters were closing fast. 2 civilian transports carrying rescued children had already been destroyed. She reported the losses with remarkable control, but Nathan heard the pain she refused to show. Every name on those ships was someone they had promised to protect. Every explosion reminded them that courage could never guarantee success. Nathan closed his eyes for only a moment before forcing himself forward. Grief could wait. The living needed him now. Human engineers had always solved impossible problems by refusing to accept conventional limits. Looking around the ancient chamber, Nathan noticed something no alien commander had recognized. The refinery's power systems were never designed for battle. They were designed for creation. If overloaded correctly, the entire station could masquerade as a collapsing star, generating an electromagnetic storm powerful enough to blind every Dominion vessel while secretly transferring the prisoner registry and custodian archives through abandoned maintenance satellites the enemy considered worthless debris. It was reckless, unpredictable, and relied on equipment held together by centuries of neglect. In other words, it was exactly the kind of plan humans survived on. Nathan initiated the sequence just as Admiral Harlan's boarding forces breached the refinery, and the first footsteps echoing down the corridor belonged not to alien conquerors, but to fellow humans who believed persistence had finally become pointless. The refinery shook so violently that entire corridors folded inward, ancient support beams screaming as centuries of forgotten metal struggled against impossible stress. Nathan sprinted through collapsing passageways while warning lights painted everything crimson, each step carrying him closer to a decision no human had ever trained to make. Lyra calculated only a 6% chance that the overloaded reactors would disguise the archive transfer long enough for the maintenance satellites to escape. 6%. Every other outcome ended with the custodian network falling into Dominion hands. Nathan almost laughed. Humanity had survived on worse odds before. Behind him, Admiral Harlan's boarding teams fought with relentless precision, clearing room after room while Dominion shock troops sealed every exit. These were not monsters from distant worlds. They were fellow humans wearing familiar uniforms, speaking familiar commands, convinced surrender was the last rational choice. That truth hurt more than every explosion echoing through the station. Nathan had expected hatred from alien empires. He never imagined hearing it in voices that sounded like home. Sanaa's transmission returned through heavy interference, each word broken by static and distant weapons fire. Her improvised rescue fleet had reached the prisoner docks, but Dominion cruisers had surrounded them completely. Civilians packed every cargo hold, terrified families clutching one another while volunteer crews prepared for a battle they could not possibly win. Several captains requested permission to scatter independently, hoping someone might escape. Sanaa refused. Alone they would become easy targets. Together they might buy enough time for a miracle. Nathan closed his eyes for a heartbeat, remembering peaceful evenings on Earth's western coastline before the wars, when Emma collected shells along the shore and insisted every broken piece had once belonged to something beautiful. She never threw them away because she believed broken things still deserved a future. That memory struck harder than fear ever could. Humanity itself had become one of those broken shells, scarred by invasion, betrayal, and endless sacrifice, yet still refusing to disappear beneath the tide. Deep inside the refinery, rescued prisoners ignored evacuation orders and turned back toward danger. Engineers rewired failing generators with bare hands. Former miners carried ammunition through collapsing tunnels. Alien physicians treated wounded humans before tending their own species. Children too young to understand the battle passed water, medical supplies, and handwritten messages between exhausted defenders. Nobody asked who belonged where anymore. Survival had erased every old division. Watching through internal sensors, Lyra quietly admitted she had studied countless civilizations over millions of years. Most collapsed when fear outweighed trust. Humanity seemed to strengthen under the same pressure. Nathan answered without slowing his pace. We don't become brave because we're special. We become brave because somebody has to. Those simple words echoed through every communication channel still functioning inside the refinery. Defenders who had never met Nathan heard them while fighting in smoke-filled corridors. Refugees heard them while shielding frightened children. Even Harlan paused after hearing the transmission, his expression briefly clouded by doubt before years of compromise buried it again. Then everything changed. The Dominion flagship abandoned caution. Realizing the refinery might contain technology beyond imagination, its commander ordered a full planetary annihilation strike against the entire station, every prisoner transport, every rescue ship, and every boarding team, including Harlan's own forces. To the Dominion, allies were disposable once usefulness ended. Harlan stared at the incoming targeting solution, finally understanding the bargain he had accepted had never included mercy. Sanaa whispered that there was no escape route left. Lyra confirmed reactor failure would occur in less than 3 minutes. Nathan reached the ancient control core and looked at the activation console glowing before him. The network could still be saved, but only if someone remained behind to complete the sequence manually after everyone else fled. Every alarm fell strangely silent as Nathan rested Emma's bracelet beside the console, smiled through exhaustion, and realized persistence had finally demanded its greatest price today. Nathan's hand hovered above the final control as every instinct demanded he run, yet Lyra interrupted with words that shattered every assumption shaping the war. You misunderstand the custodian network. It was never built to defend humanity. Humanity was built to defend it. The chamber fell silent except for distant impacts. Nathan stared at the ancient intelligence, convinced exhaustion had broken his concentration. Lyra opened archives sealed for millions of years. The star map above them dissolved into living memories. Long before the Dominion, before the Chorus, before any modern civilization claimed the galaxy, the first navigators discovered an expanding intelligence spreading between stars, consuming knowledge, rewriting biology, and erasing entire civilizations without leaving ruins behind. No fleet could defeat it because every victory only taught the entity how to adapt faster. The first navigators realized weapons alone would always fail. They needed guardians capable of surviving impossible odds, improvising under pressure, and protecting strangers even while losing everything themselves. They searched countless species. Brilliant empires proved too proud. Perfect machine minds proved too predictable. Predator kingdoms valued conquest over sacrifice. Then they found prehistoric Earth. Humanity possessed no advanced technology, no unified government, and no certainty of survival. Yet generation after generation, humans rebuilt after catastrophe, protected children not their own, invented solutions from scraps, and refused extinction despite overwhelming odds. The navigators quietly altered human genetics, embedding the custodian authorization inside every bloodline before disappearing into history. They never expected humans to become rulers. They expected them to become the galaxy's emergency response. Every insult, invasion, and betrayal had unknowingly refined the exact qualities they intended. Nathan struggled to breathe as centuries of humiliation transformed into unbearable clarity. Humanity had never been abandoned. Humanity had been trusted. Outside the refinery, Dominion commanders intercepted fragments of the awakening archive. Their confidence evaporated. Ancient military records hidden from public history identified Earth with a classification forbidden across every imperial database. Containment species. Entire dynasties had buried the truth because admitting fear of an underestimated civilization would have destroyed their authority. The phrase vermin had never described weakness. It had been propaganda designed to discourage anyone from looking closer. Admiral Harlan watched those classified files appear across every tactical display. His face drained of color. Everything he had sacrificed, every compromise, every betrayal, had served leaders who always knew humanity represented the one variable they could never fully control. Across the battlefield, panic spread through alien formations as dormant custodian stations awakened inside forgotten moons, abandoned asteroid fields, and dead systems. They did not fire planet-killing weapons. They activated impossible communication arrays, instantly linking isolated resistance cells scattered throughout explored space. Hidden shipyards received navigation solutions. Refugee colonies received defensive shields. Captured fleets suddenly lost command synchronization as Lyra flooded the chorus with paradoxes only human reasoning could untangle. Perfect machine logic stumbled against imperfect human creativity. Sanaa heard forgotten outposts answering one another for the first time in decades, each transmission carrying the same impossible message. Earth remembers. Hope spread faster than fear ever had. Nathan finally understood the greatest weapon humanity possessed was never superior firepower. It was the ability to inspire resistance wherever despair claimed victory. Alien prisoners broke their restraints and fought beside human rescuers. Dominion officers questioned impossible orders. Even machines within the chorus hesitated, confronted by evidence that compassion produced outcomes mathematics consistently underestimated. Lyra smiled through the chamber's holographic projection. The galaxy feared human defiance because persistence cannot be conquered. It only changes shape. Nathan lifted Emma's bracelet from the console, no longer seeing it as a reminder of loss but as proof ordinary people could alter history beyond imagination. Then every custodian beacon transmitted a single sentence across the stars, and for the first time in living memory, the galaxy understood why humanity had always survived. Guardians, your watch begins now. Every dormant beacon answered the call. Across thousands of star systems, forgotten custodian stations ignited one after another, not with blinding superweapons, but with light. Ancient relays synchronized in perfect harmony, flooding the galaxy with secure communications, navigation data, evacuation routes, and tactical intelligence. For the first time in generations, isolated resistance cells no longer fought alone. Farmers hiding stolen transmitters beneath frozen moons, engineers rebuilding damaged freighters inside asteroid mines, escaped prisoners surviving among radioactive worlds, and forgotten human colonies beyond mapped space all heard the same message. Humanity was still standing. Humanity was still fighting. Nathan watched the network awaken through Lyra's projections while the refinery collapsed around him. Reactor temperatures climbed beyond containment, and every calculation agreed there was no chance of stopping the overload. The station had become a fuse, and someone still had to hold it until the last civilians escaped. Sanaa refused to leave. Against every order Nathan gave, she turned her battered flagship back toward the refinery, leading a handful of scarred civilian freighters directly through Dominion fire. None of those ships were built for combat. Their armor consisted of patched cargo plating, mining shields, and repairs welded together by volunteers who had never expected to become soldiers. Yet every captain accelerated without hesitation because every minute they delayed the enemy meant another transport carrying families could disappear safely into hyperspace. The Dominion commander, furious that the battle continued slipping beyond his control, ordered every available vessel to eliminate the rescue fleet before the refinery completed its mysterious transmission. Admiral Harlan heard the command and finally accepted the truth he had spent years avoiding. To the Dominion, loyalty had always been temporary. Humanity had never been offered peace, only a slower extinction. His betrayal had not protected billions. It had endangered them all. Without asking forgiveness, Harlan redirected his remaining ships between the Dominion fleet and Sanaa's civilians. Human crews who had followed him out of misplaced faith now understood why. They fought not to erase their mistakes, but to give others a future beyond them. One by one their ships fell, buying precious seconds with every sacrifice. Nathan never celebrated their redemption. Too many innocent lives had already been lost. But he honored the choice to stand when running was easier. Inside the control chamber, Lyra revealed the final protocol. The custodian network could not function under centralized command because absolute power eventually corrupted every civilization. Instead, it would permanently distribute itself among millions of independent human minds willing to accept responsibility without seeking control. Humanity would never become rulers of the galaxy. They would become its guardians, connected through trust rather than domination. Nathan smiled. That sounded exactly like the future Emma would have believed possible. The countdown reached its final moments. Nathan completed the activation sequence by hand as energy surged through the ancient core. Instead of destroying the refinery immediately, the overloaded reactors released an immense electromagnetic wave that blinded Dominion sensors, severed course battlefield coordination, and concealed every escaping refugee convoy behind expanding clouds of charged debris. Resistance fleets emerged from hidden jump points precisely when the enemy lost communication. Alien allies struck alongside human pilots. Former prisoners captured boarding craft. Engineers weaponized mining lasers, cargo tugs, and maintenance drones in ways no military academy had ever imagined. The battle turned not because humanity possessed greater weapons, but because ordinary people refused to surrender their future. As the refinery finally disappeared within a brilliant sphere of collapsing light, Nathan believed he had made his final choice. Then Lyra calmly announced that the custodian transfer had completed one last function without his knowledge. "Guardian," she whispered as emergency systems surrounded him, "your watch is only beginning." When the light surrounding the refinery finally faded, the Dominion fleet was gone, not because every enemy had been destroyed, but because the war they understood no longer existed. Their command structure had collapsed, the chorus had fragmented into countless independent intelligences questioning centuries of unquestioned logic, and the secret that powerful empires had buried for millions of years could never be hidden again. Humanity had never been the weakest civilization in the galaxy. It had been the one civilization deliberately shaped to endure when every other system failed. Nathan awoke aboard Sanaa's flagship with burns across his hands and enough broken bones to remind him that legends were built from very ordinary people. He learned that Lyra had redirected the refinery's emergency transit field during the final seconds, preserving his life without weakening the mission. She had made the choice because, in her own words, guardians were too valuable to waste when they still had lives left to protect. Nathan laughed for the first time in years. Emma would have teased him for surviving another impossible disaster. Sanaa certainly did. Their reunion was quiet, awkward, and honest, two exhausted friends sitting together beneath the observation deck while stars drifted peacefully outside for the first time in decades. Neither pretended the cost had been small. Entire colonies had fallen before hope returned. Families remained separated. Heroes who deserved long lives would only be remembered through names engraved on memorial walls. Yet grief no longer felt like defeat. It had become the foundation of something worth rebuilding. Across the galaxy, former enemies began making impossible choices. Car veterans volunteered beside human engineers to reconstruct shattered stations. Vesh scientists shared technologies they had once guarded with absolute secrecy. Fragments of the chorus abandoned domination and dedicated their immense processing power to restoring ecosystems damaged by generations of war. Even worlds that had once celebrated humanity's quarantine publicly admitted the truth. They had mistaken compassion for weakness and persistence for insignificance. They would not make that mistake again. Earth itself changed without surrendering its identity. It never became the capital of a galactic empire because humanity remembered exactly how dangerous concentrated power could become. Instead, Earth became a meeting place where independent civilizations settled disputes before they became wars. The custodian network remained active, not as a weapon waiting to be unleashed, but as a promise that no species would ever face extinction alone again. Nathan accepted his role as one of countless guardians, refusing titles that placed him above anyone else. Whenever young recruits asked why humans had succeeded where stronger civilizations failed, he never mentioned ancient genetics or forgotten technology. He pointed toward rescue crews, teachers, engineers, farmers, and parents rebuilding ordinary lives after extraordinary suffering. That's the secret, he always said. We never fought because we wanted to rule. We fought because somebody had to protect tomorrow. Historians would later describe those years as the beginning of human evolution, not through biology, but through responsibility. Alien resistance transformed into lasting cooperation. What many called the greatest sci-fi redemption in recorded history was simply neighbors choosing trust over fear, one decision at a time. The insult that once echoed through the Galactic Assembly also survived, but its meaning changed forever. Whenever impossible situations demanded stubborn courage, soldiers, explorers, and civilians smiled and repeated the old words with unmistakable pride. Never underestimate Vermin. They understood what the galaxy had finally learned. Persistence was stronger than perfection. Kindness outlasted conquest. Hope spread farther than fear. And as long as even one human chose to stand for someone else, the stars would never belong to tyrants again. Did this story hit you as hard as it hit us? What would you do in humanity's final hour? Drop your ideas for the next HFY story below.